We're a country of around 65 million people or so. Now, if you consider the expanded definition of unemployment in South Africa, which, by the way, is nearly 43%, this equates to 12.4 million people who simply cannot find work right now. Of this figure, 3.7 million human beings in this country are discouraged, meaning they simply do not want to find work, and that's for a myriad of reasons. Enter News 24's On the Record Job Summit, tasking itself with the ultimate question: how can we add 5 million more quality formal sector jobs in the next decade? First, we check in with our specialist journalist, Cyril Paton, on all the highlights of her panel and hear from business leaders, economists, thought leaders, and the president himself. Then, in this order, catch my candid interviews with SARS Commissioner Edward Kieswetter and former Finance Minister Trevor Manuel on our jobs crisis and a range of other issues. Lastly, we'll share but a snippet of our 5 minutes door-stopping, as journalists like to say, President Cyril Ramaphosa on the Johannesburg governance crisis. All of this, of course, on the record, on the lead, on News 24.
You're listening to The Lead on News 24 with your host, broadcast journalist Graeme Raubenheimer.
Our specialist journalist, Cyril Paton, was the moderator and joined by the president of the Congress of South African Trade Unions, COSATU for short, of course, Zingizwa Losi, the CEO of Business Leadership South Africa, that's Busi Mabuso, as well as the award-winning senior political economist at Standard Bank, that's Simon Freemantle, and the CEO of Agri-SA, Johan Kotze. And Carol, welcome to The Lead. As you can hear the bells ringing out for everybody to go back into the auditorium on day one of the News 24 On the Record Job Summit. It's been action-packed. A lot has been said before we get to your panel.
It's exhilarating, and the adrenaline is flowing, and the energy is flowing, and the positivity, I'm so glad to say, despite the subject matter, the positivity about where we're going is great. As the President said, every problem does have a solution, and I felt that. I really felt that in our panel, that every person was there to put forward solutions, and that's great. So I enjoyed it. I thoroughly enjoyed myself.
Yeah. One of the things in News 24's research before the On the Record Summit, which was very pertinent, is although mining has declined somewhat, a lot of our strength and promise lies in the manufacturing sector and farming, of course. A lot of that stuff can be, emboldened even further to create a lot more jobs. Did that sort of come out in the panel?
There's 1 million people employed in agriculture, and that could be 2 million. There's lots of scope for growth. And in fact, the growth over the last 30 years in agriculture has been phenomenal. And that is another point that came through. We are now an export nation, which we never were. So that was very positive. Mining, we didn't get to talk about much, but again, that is one area where there could be growth. There could be big growth, but unfortunately, the regulation of mining has been a big problem.
The Mount Rushmore of issues, and right at the end of your panel, you sort of put this to everybody involved and go, what really is the top of your list for the massive stumbling block in South Africa today? Before we play this clip of how they responded, what is Carol's?
We had a look at this. Each person had their opportunity. I gave mine: crime, corruption, and security, safety and security, rule of law, government dysfunction, particularly local government, and bad education, poor quality education. As one of my panelists said, if you pass with 30%, then you don't know 70% of the stuff. And that is true. We can't carry on condoning this and celebrating this as if it's a great achievement.
Let's throw to that clip now.
I think poor quality education and skills, and I think crime, safety and security are my top 3. Is anyone ready? Yeah?
Carol, I agree with those 3 because I think if you deal with a government dysfunction, especially from a municipal perspective, that ring fencing model that is going to be introduced into water, it probably then addresses water security. We have already started to deal with electricity and transport and logistics. And I think all of this work that we're doing from a reform perspective is going to address policy uncertainty, crime, safety and security. That Madlanga Commission, I'm hoping, is going to be the nugent moment for us, where it's going to introduce the necessary reforms to can actually really fundamentally change and reform our criminal justice system, as it were.
Water is life for us as farmers.
All above.
No. Wait. No transport, we can go back to donkeys and pair, we can make it, so don't stress about that one. But water security, number one for us. I would say crime, safety and security, and maybe the reason for that. If you push down the sentiment and trust of farmers, they don't spend their money.
Right.
Remember, we invest. There's no development finance in South Africa for agriculture. It's equity money we put back into the ground. So crime, safety and security, and then maybe a different one, a weak economy.
Simon, you're next.
I'll take the liberty of saying I've already emphasized that crime, safety and security are absolutely apex. So I'm going to pick another three. Number one.
You can't. You're not allowed to.
Definitely, government dysfunction. There are islands of effectiveness in our government, and they are showing us what we could do if we had more of these.
Yes.
It's remarkable how much
SARS.
Operation Vulindlela has done. It's a small unit.
Absolutely.
If we could emulate that across, but it's just a sign of how a lack of that effectiveness is holding us back. Policy uncertainty, but I would add to that a lack of coordination. So we have policies, but they are poorly coordinated across government departments. And for example, in tourism, where I think there's enormous growth potential, we're not coordinating government departments effectively enough to capture that. And certainly, I would say education. It's something that I find in my industry, and I've worked for the bank for 17 years now, people have stopped asking me about education reform. Because in the corporate sector, they no longer really see it as plausible because of the lack of traction.
Yeah.
So I fear we've almost given up, and we can't afford to. So that has to be another big priority.
Right.
Just note, he gave me his water. So I have Standard Bank's water. So you didn't go for water.
Surely you can offer more than that. Singiswa?
Logistics and what is it?
Transport.
Transport, yes. I think when rail fails, it means a farmer cannot get the produce to the markets. And therefore it means the prices of food are rising. If a mining company cannot export, it then means jobs are lost.
Yeah.
All right, coming back to some of the highlights earlier in today's day one of On the Record Summit, let's go to Dr. Kay Jin's playbook on China specifically. And I mean, China has been that emerging power for the longest time. And from the outside, from the Western point of view, has always been, it's very much the state and politics playing that hegemonic role and how China's emerged in that on a massive scale. But it's, the doc was quite emphatic that that's not really the case once you take a closer look.
If you look at the period during which China grew the fastest, it was ranking 91 in ease of doing business, 78 in the corruption index, slowly moving up. Now it's improved quite a bit. But during China's fastest period of growth, the rankings were very poor. That's the China paradox. On the other hand, China is the country that has grown the fastest for the longest period of time in all of human history. And with a country that is that big, with more than 1 billion people, to have continuously grown for 26 years above 8% is a success, I'd say. Especially because of the heterogeneity, the complexity of that many people.
What struck with you?
Right. Dr. Jin, she's an esteemed academic, and I really would urge everyone to go and have a look at that. Have a look at her presentation, because really I felt the scales fall from my eyes. And what she said was that It's not a state-led. Economic growth is decentralized in China. Investment in economic growth is decentralized. And how it works is that local governments provide the support. They provide massive support. They provide every support you need. You need finance, you need water, you need permits, you need a school for your kids. If you're a talented person being brought into this place, they will fix it. And it's kind of a misunderstanding to think that it's the state, the sort of central state, which is the way we like to think of the economy being led by the central state. She was saying, well, that isn't actually the case at all. These local governments compete, and they compete to attract companies. And if you don't deliver for that company is going to get up and walk to the next local government area. But that was part of it. The other part of it, which I thought we can really learn from, was her comment that, what made the change? What made China, how did China industrialize? How did China suddenly start growing? And she said, well, the change came when they put economics in front of politics. They said, we're not going to worry about the ideology. We're putting politics behind us, and we are going to have pragmatic and practical economic policy. And that was another point that then came out in my panel, which was where people were saying, let's just have a pragmatic approach to diplomacy. Let's have a pragmatic approach to our foreign relations, and let's build trade and investment. That should be our priority.
And doesn't it speak to Dr. Jin sort of saying, it's not so much the state, but it's actually the private sector that's bringing a lot on board. And that is what I was thinking last night when I was going through News 24's research, is that public-private partnerships, although the state tends to take on quite a lot of debt and a lot of the risk in massive projects, it's something that needs to happen a lot quicker, and we need to do it a lot more. The president, what did you think stood out for you?
Look, I felt the president was a little bit defensive. He started off with a defense of BE, basically saying that, the reason why we have such high unemployment is because of our structural our history and where we come from. And I completely agree with him. Yes, it's structural. Where I disagree with him is that 30% over the last 30 years we haven't tackled the structural problems, and that's exactly what we need to do. We need to tackle the structural problems. So he was insistent that we need transformation, and although he didn't use the words BEE, I think he was implying that you've got to have transformation. And my response to that would be, well, what is transformation? What is it? Because I think everyone is now saying transformation is not making a few people rich. Transformation is lifting up the livelihoods of the poor people, of the poorest of the poor, and that is what we should be doing, and giving those people opportunities through quality public services, quality education, quality health, so that people do have opportunities and they're not stuck in poverty. So that was really where we were at.
And then the president, as if he was very much listening and reading News 24's research, actually comes out and admits, the government CETA program, and this is this long-haul program in which, public office bearers or people who are in government get to be part of the CETA program and basically upskill themselves. Yes. But we know that it has not been immune to corruption over the years.
And one of the things that I have said needs to be done is to overhaul the CETA system and replace it with a fit-for-purpose system. Because I have found, and in my many travels around the world, one of the two countries that I visited and looked very closely at what they do, Germany and Switzerland, where they have a dual system, skills, academics, skills acquisition, as well as practical skills acquisition in the workplace. Now, this is the way that we are now going to move forward. The CETA system has not served us well at all. It must now be changed.
Well, look, I mean, he has said this before. He said it, I think he said it at the ANC's conference in December for the first time, that we've got to relook at the CETAs. And just to remind people, the CETAs are these things that actually businesses pay for. Businesses pay for them through a payroll tax. So they're paying 1.5% of what from ever. Businesses actually are paying for this, and the return on this money is pathetic. And it's turned into a jobs for pals and a contracts for pals kind of situation. And the return that we should be getting for businesses spending 1.5% of payroll on training should be way better than we're getting it. So I really think that is a big thing tackled, and if the president, as his next area of reform, could just get that done, I would be extremely happy, and I think so would the business community, and then the beneficiaries would be hopefully getting better quality training in a different form.
Right. I think let's just leave it here. What else are you looking forward to at On the Record here at the Cape Town International Convention Centre?
I'm looking forward to the keynote by Montek Ahluwalia from India tomorrow 11:15, and he's really the person, the economist who did the technical work, who actually built India's economy into the third biggest economy in the world. And he did this through structural reform, massive structural reform, and taking apart the patronage networks of the old sort of colonial and immediately post-colonial society, dismantling that. And as a result, we've seen India booming. So I'm really looking forward to that. And I always love listening to our investigative journalists, and Jeff Wicks on Peter's panel is going to be great. That's Friday, 1:30.
Yeah, delegates were here earlier, Carol, taking pictures with Jeff.
No. Jeff, who uncovered Babita's murder, is my personal hero, and I think of many other people too.
Thank you so much for your time on the lead. I really appreciate it. Carol can now heave a sigh of relief as her duties are now concluded at the On the Record Summit here at the Cape Town International Convention Centre. Always lekker talking to you, Carol.
Thanks so much, Graeme.
Well, I'm Ed Kieswetter, currently running a small company in Pretoria called SARS.
And you got a whole bunch more money in the budget this year. Are you happy with what you've been allocated?
No, I'm not happy, because we are still underfunded, and the money that we were given is helpful but not enough.
Right. How does SARS find itself in the debate about accelerating job growth in South Africa today? How does it form part of that very complex scenario and very difficult question that belies all of us?
Well, firstly, the most obvious work that we do is crafted in our mandate to collect taxes, to improve the overall compliance culture, as well as facilitating legitimate trade. Now, there's a direct correlation between that being efficient, trusted, and the level of confidence that investors, both local and overseas, have in South Africa. And so that's an important catalytic role that strengthens the integrity of our environment for generally investors and consumers. So that's the most obvious. But what's also important is what happens to the money that we collect. And clearly, we do not directly impact on how that money is spent. And our continued expression would be that over time, more and more of that money must go into investment in productive capacity, new businesses, factories, plants, knowledge work. Some of that go into universities and training, because that builds human capacity. and ultimately the creation of jobs. So SARS is integral to our economic well-being.
And how many more jobs would you like to create for the Revenue Service? Is that something that forms part of your 5-year plan, for example? And then perhaps a two-pronged question, Commissioner. How is the rebuilding process after those, what some like to call the 9 wasted years?
Well, so it is common cause that SARS was hollowed out during state capture. The modernization program was stalled, and many experienced professionals in senior leadership and technical positions were either marginalized or they were forced out of the organization. So in the last 7 years, it was about modernizing SARS, deploying the latest technology and artificial intelligence, without which we would not have been as effective and efficient as we can, but at the same time building the human capability. We have an explicit objective to ensure that we evolve our skills profile with where technology is creating innovative and disruptive enabling environments, the use and deployment, for example, of artificial intelligence. What we have done, though, is to say to our people, we are not going to announce a retrenchment program. We're going to be thinking ahead and making sure that we invest in our people so that they remain relevant as the future world of work evolves, which means that routine work, administrative work, that volume of work becomes less and less and less. But increasingly we need people to serve taxpayers and traders, but also to augment knowledge work, investigative work, with insights from data and AI to improve the integrity and the quality of our outcomes. So it's not about reducing our workforce, it's about reprofiling who they are. And in fact, in certain areas like advanced transfer pricing, international taxation, high wealth taxation schemes and arrangements, forensic investigative skills, we in fact need to increase our workforce in those areas. But it's not expanding jobs, and that would be my general concern for a conference like this, is to ask the question, not do we need to create 5 million jobs, but firstly, what kind of jobs do we need to create? Because we cannot create jobs for the 4th industrial revolution. We have to create jobs for the future, where we will coexist with AIs and robots. And secondly, my bigger concern is whether the supply side is alive and responsive to that. What happens to the 1 million kids we lose over the 12 years of schooling? And then the 400,000, 400,000 that comes out, are they ready for the world of work? Or are they in fact rendered almost unemployable, even though they have a matric or school leaving certificate?
Commissioner, I don't want to keep you too long. It's very quick follow-up questions. One, if you can give me a percentage, how far has SARS rebuilt from those dark days? Can you give me a short answer? What's your percentage?
Well, most of the recovery has been done. The hard work is still ensuring that the changes are institutionalized. I would say that of the Nugent Commission recommendations, 95% of them have been implemented. And on the change program, we haven't restored the organization. We are significantly better off than what we were 10 years ago.
And lastly, what do you want to say to those criminals who are hiding their assets, as the asset forfeiture unit has been seen in more recent years to be a lot more vicious? There's a lot more teeth. There's a lot more going after these guys. They've been getting away. We know that graft is costing our economy drastically. The estimation by News 24's research is up to 15% of the GDP. Your answer to that, what do you want to say to the criminals out there?
I'm a strong proponent that government have to collaborate. We have not been good at collaboration. We are fragmented in our approach. So SARS, the BMA, SAPS, Home Affairs, working together at the ports of entry, enforcing the laws so that we can ensure high quality investigations of criminals and then handing it over to the prosecuting authorities to get excellent prosecution and then of course quality judiciary so that those who believe that they can undermine the well-being of South Africans by breaking the law, that they know that there will be consequences. I would like to see many more in orange overalls.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I really do appreciate it. Thanks for coming on the lead on News 24. Really appreciate your time, Mr. Manuel. On the lead on News 24, thank you very much. I really do appreciate it. If you were president, we know you were the finance minister for a really long time, but if you were president, what would you do in your first 30 days to boost job creation in South Africa today?
I think that the president's primary responsibility is to government. And government has the ability to influence society. And that influence is because of the positive messages from government, and we don't have that at the moment. So that's the first issue. We dealt with this in the National Development Plan. We need to ensure that we fix the political administrative interface. It's very broken at the moment. That's what the Madlanga Commission is about. It's broken. It has to be fixed. And then we have to sort out what every government department does. And it doesn't take a long time. You can start with those that matter in the lives of people. Start with police. Start with education. Focus on upgrading the skills of teachers. Those kinds of things can send very, very positive messages, because we have an education system that caters for the children of the wealthy and the children of the poor distinctly separately. You've got to fix that issue. And similarly, we have to work on public health, because the gap between what people have in the private sector and what exists in the public sector it's inconceivable that it happens in the same country, and those kinds of things have to happen quite quickly.
Yeah, 100%. You look at the Madlanga Commission revelations, and of course, based on News 24 research, we found that up to 15% of our GDP can be eroded by the fact that corruption is really eating into the gains of SARS' work. You just saw the commissioner peering over your shoulder. When you look at the revelations coming out of Madlanga, does it keep you up at night? Do you go, jeepers, how did things get so bad?
I don't know how it became so bad, but if you neglect matters, if there aren't consequences for actions, then you get this kind of problem. And you know, when General Mkhwanazi says that virtually every senior cop in Gauteng is in the hands of the big five, at first you kind of sit up and say, no, you're exaggerating. But as you look at both the Madlanga Commission and the ad hoc committee in Parliament unfold, it's hard to escape that conclusion. And if that's what the Guardians look like, what happens to the rest of us?
Yeah. If you weren't a politician and you weren't a finance minister and you weren't somebody of high respect and astute in the South African context, what other job do you think you would have done, Mr. Manuel?
I actually can't work that out. It's an impossible situation because, I can't work it out. I am what I am because of the circumstances that confronted me.
Yeah. What sector of our economy do we really need to aggressively accelerate in the next coming years to realize 5 million jobs in 10 years? Your opinion?
I think we need to ensure that we can catch up with the rest of the world in the tech sectors. That's where the jobs are going to be. But it does mean that we've got to rapidly retool our education system to improve on mathematical education and quantitative skills.
And then lastly, politically, major elections this year. Our municipalities are crumbling. The Auditor General says so. The writing's been on the wall for a really long time. People are crying out for service delivery. High critical. I would argue the local government elections are more critical than the national elections. Would you agree?
The arrangements we have in most towns and cities, we've got these hastily conjured up coalitions that mean nothing to anybody except the councillors involved. Is not working. We need to rethink the constitutional imperatives relating to local government, and must do so quite quickly.
And lastly, what do you say to the people that go, hey, I look at the Madlanga Commission, I look at the municipalities, I look at the state of South Africa, this is the death knell for the African National Congress? Do you agree with that sort of sentiment or not?
I'm not here to discuss politics with you. But you can look at a number of different political parties, and they're all facing the same kinds of challenges. Now in the death knell, I'm saying that what we thought would work at local government level with elections is not working. We need a rethink of the issues. And if we have to go through the portals of the elections this year to prove that point, I'm sure it will be proven, but we need to look at the arrangements on the other side of this.
Do you miss being finance minister?
No.
Why?
I've done what I could. I've done it for 13 years. It's longer than almost anybody else has had an opportunity to do. And that was a long time ago. I've not been finance minister since, for longer than I was finance minister. I'm very comfortable with where I am.
Mr. Manuel, thank you so much for your time on the lead on News 24. Hi there, Mr. President. Graeme Raubenheimer here with News 24's The Lead. You alluded to in your speech a short while ago that local governance, especially in a municipal election year, remains a bit of a weak point in terms of the creation of jobs. And looking at the state of Johannesburg at the moment with a confusion for the public about, is Dada Marero the mayor or not? Is this giving you sleepless nights?
No, it's giving me a much clearer determination on what we should do. We should have a strong mayor in Johannesburg. And by the way, Dada Marero is still the mayor of Johannesburg, and there's no change there. And of course, it is politics where people in political parties will say, we want this one, we want that one. So Dada Marero remains where he is. He's the mayor of Johannesburg.
Stay tuned to The Lead on News 24 for part 2 of the On the Record Summit. We'll be sitting down with News 24 Investigations editor Peter du Toit and discussing how crime and corruption erodes at GDP gains in this country and how we can reverse that to get our economy growing and creating jobs. My name's Graeme Raubenheimer, this is The Lead, and this is the South African story.